So I wonder if I could turn to you now, Lena, because you've been photographing Theo and the beasts for about 7 years now. Could you describe for us a little bit the how you first encountered the beast? How did you and Theo meet?
I wrote to Theo out of the blue that I was going to be in Holland because my previous project called Lost Souls had one of the last stopped nearby in Delft because I was photographing in Utrecht, in Leiden, and in Delft. And I knew I was going to be nearby. So I wrote to him. I saw videos online before and said, can I come and see? And he said, sure, why not? So I didn't really expect very much. I thought it would be just a short visit. And Theo was working on some of the leg movements. The beast didn't hatch yet. It was still, evolving. And the little that I saw, I thought it was just marvelous. I also was finishing a project on Cabinets of Wonder and Curiosities, which is very dark. And it's an exploration of wonder. I went through and photographed in over 17 cabinets of wonder and curiosities, otherwise known as Wunderkammern. And much of that work is pretty dark side of wonder. And when I saw Theo's Strandbeest, I thought, well, this is beautiful. This is really a light side of wonder. And it felt very satisfying. And so that was the first encounter. And the first encounter was also the first decision to have that as a project. And that's how it started.
And when you first saw one of the beasts move, could you just kind of walk through for us, kind of describe the feelings you were having as you're looking at this creature on the beach? Because I think all of us have a very similar kind of response to your work, Theo.
Yeah. Well, it's an instant enchantment. And it's also a very peculiar reaction because it's simultaneously striking and lingering. A lot of things are just striking. They strike you and they leave you instantaneously. Billboards, advertising, frankly, a lot of art is like that. Just strikes you and you close your eyes and you forgot what it was all about. There are quite a few things that slowly make their way into you and on low flame keep you going. But extremely rarely you see something that strikes you and lingers. There's also a fascinating thing, a range of not only emotional references, because they're sophisticated, but they're very simple and childish. They're very witty, but they're also very serious. And there's also intellectual range and art history range, at least for me. And you immediately think of Leonardo da Vinci drawings, sketches for the machines, Panamarenko, Gerrit von Buckel, but it's also something completely original. So something that's all very archaic and yet very futuristic at the same time also has that incredible power of sort of capturing you. Another thing I was wondering about was the Bauhaus and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy and their fascination with kinetic sculptures.
Indeed.
Laszlo Moholy-Nagy wrote a book on sculpture, and the fifth and final progressive step for sculpture was going to be kinetic. So, and here it was.
There we go. The other things that sort of strike me about the materiality of the creatures is that, you were talking about this before, Theo, the idea of like wanting to hold to a single material and not like the idea of kinetic objects, of things that move on, that that transport or move from place to place are often made up of these kinds of compound technologies. I mean, we've known how to make things move for centuries, for millennia. And then you see these objects, and they're just made out of these pipes. Like, you talk about them as artistic protein, in a way, like all of our bodies are made up of the basic element of life, which is protein, and so for the beasts, it's these plastic tubes are their protein. But you can also think of that in terms of the modernist idea of media specificity. Now, sometimes you refer to yourself, or you've talked about your relationship to these beasts in a couple of very strikingly different ways. One of which is, as the creator, as a kind of a god, if you will, but also as their slave. And I think that idea of being the slave to the beast kind of connects to that idea of the media specificity and pushing the limits of it. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your relationship to these tubes. Like what happens in the studio? You come in with an idea.
Yes, these strange tubes, they came into my life a long time ago, and they rule my life, you could say. You can imagine I wake up in the morning with an ingenious idea about every morning. Somehow that happens. I have an ingenious idea, and then I go to my studio, and then during the day it turns out that my ingenious idea is not that ingenious as it was in the morning, because these tubes, they protest. They don't want to realize my idea because there's a limitation in their possibilities. They don't want to do what I want to do. So they protest and they push me, in fact, to another way. You could also say they point me in another way. So at the end of the day, I go home more or less depressed, but then I go to sleep, and in the night something happens. It's something, radiation from the cosmos. And in the morning, I'm very optimistic, without reason, in fact. But I'm optimistic, and I'm going to my studio again with an ingenious idea. And in fact, the tubes, they point me where to go. So the road is very capricious, you could say. It goes not from A to B in a straight line, and it's hard to predict where you're going to go. But at the end, you could wonder if it were my ideas in the tubes. No, it were the ideas of the tubes which are realized. And usually the beast doesn't, well, it functions a bit, because I am always looking for this function. But when I look back, then I see a beautiful animal. And somehow I don't have the feeling that I did that. So you could say I have to obey the tubes, and they dictate what I have to do. I cannot dictate the tubes because they are limited in their possibilities. So by this limitation, it brings me further than I would be able to buy everything what I need to realize my idea. Then you go in a straight line, you could say.
So Lena, when I look at your photographs, I can see not only the emphasis on the kind of extraordinary geometries and structures of the creatures, but I think what's most powerful and eloquent about the work is the way that you have captured Theo's relationships to the beasts. The idea of Theo at work, struggling with the tubes, struggling with these creations. I wonder if, I know that you would travel every year back to back to The Hague and go to the beach. Walk us through a day with Theo.
You know, I have a bit of a similar experience with work taking over. You create something and you have very much illusion of control and authorship and agency, and then all of a sudden you feel like it's starting to creep into every aspect of your life and takes you over. I know a lot of writers have the same feeling about their novels and characters, and they speak about them as family members that, you know, quarrel with them, even though they are the ones created them.
Curators too, by the way.
Yes. Right. So, I would come with a very clear idea to the beach, a very strict, ingenious idea what it is that I want to photograph. And I come back with something completely different. And what is also fascinating is that I have much less time to hide myself than Theo. Because Theo tinkers and corrects and tinkers and corrects. Now, I work in 125th of a second. So 1 second divided by 125 times. And that's the fraction within which I work and have to deliver something. And say something about one man and a bunch of pipes, photographically. And try to translate the kind of after image and dream of it. And of course, it is at odds with the nature of what photography is, which is evidence. It's evidentiary. You cannot photograph what's not there. So how do you photograph a dream? Because that's really what interests me much more than anything else. And so, and it's daily sort of routine. Sand gets into my camera bag, and salty spray is very dangerous for the lenses. So I'm constantly in panic, in a state of panic, to try to deliver something that is true to Strandbeest, to Theo, and to what I see. It's very actually hard to describe that. And once in a while, when I come back and I see the whole work over the years, I see, first of all, influences that I've had in my life, you know, things that have obsessed me, Caspar David Friedrich, or Goya, or Leonardo da Vinci sketches, and things like this. I can see that, you know, this had coalesced within that fraction of a second over there. And I also see how reality, this mundane reality and the moments and the flicker of a light, that 1 second or fraction of that second, changed everything around and defied me and defied my ingenious ideas.
Both of you work with ideas that neither of you is trying exactly to make, you know, work that we would call contemporary with a capital C. It's very much work that moves through time, that makes references through history, not in a way of making a point exactly, but rather you really sense this immersion in the flow. So for you, Theo, as someone whose studio is in Delft, thinking about like not only the rich Dutch artistic history, but also the rich scientific history that Michael Friedman from Audemars Piguet and we were discussing yesterday. Like, you're clearly aware of that, of those histories, but how conscious are you when you're working? Does that inspire you in particularly direct ways?
Well, you could say that the landscape, which I'm working with the skies in Holland, they have sort of reflection, which I think is specific for that region. So Delft, in fact, where I used to live a long time, is Vermeer's city. And of course, I recognize the skies of Vermeer. And they're also on the beach. So when I'm alone on that beach, of course, I have to think of this landscape tradition in Holland. And maybe my work, because video is a part of my work. I want to make the videos on the beach often myself. And so I put the camera on the tripod and I run the beast in front of the camera with the clouds in the background. And I like to do that. So this is a sort of living painting, you could say. And it refers, in fact, to the old tradition of landscape.
And so coming here to Miami, you know, you've like, what's that?
I want to answer about capital C. Contemporary with a capital C. You know, it's very interesting. Part of the reason that I was so attracted to Theo's work is that it doesn't desperately, self-consciously try the pose of innovation. And I always felt that with the work that never made an impression on me in contemporary art was this extreme effort at innovation at all costs, which frequently feels like a pose, and it's boring. So very early on, I made a decision that innovation per se in art is a vanity move. It has to happen on its own. The only primary thing is idea and staying true to the original idea of your work. And with all the artists that I've ever admired, Terrell, or I just saw Roscoe, very beautiful work here, very striking. They really start with a thought and an idea, rather than some sort of a career move within the art market.
It's actually grounded in daily life,
yeah,
in experience. And I love the way that you describe those videos that you shoot on the beach as kind of like being akin to landscape paintings. The Vermeer skies behind the beast walking down the beach. Lena Herzog, who had dreamed of bringing the Strand Beasts to this country far before I'd even heard of them. And for those of you who will be flying out of Miami to return to your homes in other cities, the Peabody Essex Museum is putting together a tour of the Strand Beasts that will open at PEM in the fall of 2015.